So we're finally back with another Ranked League Champions tournament. A tournament that is designed around my ranked ladder bot on Discord, where the top 8 players come in to play in a top 8 tournament that with a prize pool of $5. I'm joined today by Dactor. And we have quite a few good players in here today. Any thoughts, Doctor, before we move into the first game?
Yeah, this is definitely a pretty solid bracket. I know it has the top player this time, Ice Power, who I think you played just recently in like a Swiss tournament, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely showed his skills in that series.
For sure.
And then we also have some other really good players too. Cal Harmon had some recent success in one of the Turin qualifiers, very nearly qualifying for the ECL. And yeah, just all around a really solid bracket for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, very excited to see how these players do. So with that out of the way, let's get into the first game. So I guess I'll begin with on the Norska side. Coming in with Viking facing up against Ice Power's Dark Elves. We have the usual front line of only Marauders, just to make sure that you don't get kited. Of course, Berserkers are good in the infantry fight, but much less effective if they're getting shot at by Dark Elf cavalry. But a lot of mobility too, with 4 units of unarmored skin wolves. They're slightly faster and cheaper, with some Marauder Horsemen. Actually, Marauder Horsemaster cavalry, which is really great for their anti-skirmish potential too. Some long range, good damage, and that's going to be the main core for Norska. Premier of Shadows, no Pendulum. It seems like this build really is all in on kite, especially with Ice Wolf Chariot and Wolfric on a horse.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Now, what it will be facing is a relatively defensive build, and actually I think a kite style might work very well against it because there's actually 0 ranged pressure on the Dark Elf side. They have a front line of triple Dread Spear, 3 Black Guard of Nagaron, so going super lead on the infantry, double Witch Elves for the Rampage, including the Sisters of Singing Doom for their terror effect. He has the Slaanesha's Harvesters, Doomfire Warlock ROR, double Dark Riders with shields, and it actually looks like a 4th Dread Spear, and then just Marathi with her usual kit for the Lord. So, yeah, very heavy metal. Just wanting to get in there and kill everything in melee, pretty much.
Yeah, really just the opposite of what was expected on the Norskin side. Which is pretty in line with Ice Power. He actually prefers a more standard style of play of Dark Elves I've seen than going for full kite builds, as we see with many other Dark Elf players.
Yeah, he really likes using Soul Stealer and Witch Elf Rampage to their full effect. Those are kind of the big parts of his playstyle, I'd say. Now, he's doing a pretty good job here. He's actually zoning these Marauder Horsemasters with his Dread Spears, which are shielded, silver shielded even. So they are definitely what you want, taking the fire from these Marauder Horsemasters rather than the Black Guard of Nagaron or the Witch Elves. And now there's actually a bit of a gooning here with the Slaanesha's Harvesters and Marathi going out on top of the Marauder Ice Wolf Chariots, but a really nice boat does actually not that much damage to the Celestial.
Yeah, surprisingly little damage actually.
Yeah, but the Viking doesn't fall for the trap here and get, well, he does get Soul Stealer, but only 3 units. It's not the end of the world. And in fact, I don't think it will really take any models off the Skin Wolves, so they'll be able to regenerate that relatively easily. The only real damage there was onto the Marauder Ice Wolf Chariots, which are down to a little over half HP, which is relevant, but it's not critical.
Yeah, mostly even I think just the heal for the Doomfire Warlocks was the main method, since they hadn't lost too many models either. And just some trading going both ways with no major favors going for either player. The Horse Masters are getting in some pretty good damage against the Dread Spears though, and another catch on these Ice Wolf Chariots. Playing very aggressively with those Slaanesha's Harvesters, and paying off pretty well. Now
This is going to be a big soul stealer. The Skinwolves are all blobbing on top of each other, and Marathi going to get a soul stealer. I do wonder if he thought maybe it was on cooldown because of the Slaanesha's Harvester's use of the ability. However, it will only be a few Skinwolf models taken down, but the Norskins may wish to sit back and kite for a while just to ensure that their Skinwolves can make full effect of the regeneration that they have.
Yeah, it's actually one of the strange things about going for an anti-kite style. You actually set yourself up to have a decent kite build yourself, and with 4 Marauder Horse Masters, he can definitely afford to really get a lot of value on his mobile forces.
Yeah.
Now the question is, will it be enough? The front line of Norska is actually pretty thin here. And do you think the Blackguard would just be able to carry out the win if it comes down to a melee fight?
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's going to come down to good use of spells, and I do think Viking needs to be a little bit more efficient with his use of ammunition now. He's doing better recently. At the start, he was firing into Dread Spears from the front, but now he's begun firing into the Blackguard of Nagarond, and really the Marauder Horsemasters have a lot of killing power for all of this unshielded Dark Elf infantry. So they need to make full effect of that. And actually, it looks like we're going for a pick on the Marathi. Oh my god, she's dying.
Yeah,
she got surrounded by Skinwolves, and she does get a Soul Stealer, but she's gone down. Oh my god, she's just dead. And this is the problem with Marathi, especially on horse, is that she has a very small HP pool. So yeah, he baits the Soul Stealer, but it's a little bit over-aggressive, or very over-aggressive, and Marathi just goes down, pinned in by the Skinwolves. Skinwolves, a very high mass unit. You have to be very careful about that. And man, that is huge. That definitely swings this well into the favor of the Viking.
Yeah, and the balance of power too, very much showing it. But Ice Power finally does get the melee fight that he's been looking for. And the fact that the Rampages are going down on the Marauders and soon to be the Skinwolves too, he may be able to pull it back. But it really depends on if his infantry actually hold here. We're seeing some nice cycle charging onto the Marauders, but the Norskin front line's actually holding out pretty well, despite only being Marauders.
Yeah, now the Dark Riders are going for some cycle charges, which is very nice. The Skinwolves might want to start getting aggressive at this point, just because they are running out of chaff to kind of tank for them. And indeed, all of the Marauders have broken at this point. So it may be possible for the Dark Elves to actually grind this game out. Now, they will have to be very wary of the spells and the boats on the Norskin side. And the Norskins also still have some ammunition left on both the Marauder Horsemasters and even the Ice Wolf Chariots. So they should be able to put some more chip damage into these elite Dark Elf units. But the Norskins have to be very careful. Wolfric getting danger close to some Witch Elves, and if he rampages into them, then it'd basically be a trade for earlier's Marathi pick.
Yeah, and with the rampaging, it's actually a really difficult position for the Viking. He can't cycle charge nearly as effectively, and we saw earlier one unit of Skinwolves being brought down to half HP due to that. So in terms of a straight up fight, Ice Power is still pretty ahead, but the Viking will be able to run out the Dark Elf passive buff that they get just by continuing to skirmish with the Marauder Horsemen. Pretty nice play. And also very important to note that this Fimir of Shadows does not have pendulums. He'll only be relying on boats and the missiles to deal with all of this elite Dark Elf infantry.
Well, he has been spamming Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma over the entire course of the game onto the Blackguard of Nagarond. And it actually, it's pretty magic efficient, I think. It's a very cheap spell. And in terms of HP damage, it almost does as much as, say, a Spirit Leech to a cavalry unit. So, not bad at all. It'll chip down the Blackguard over the course of the game. And you can see the Blackguard are all getting relatively low on HP. All of them below half, and 2 of them at about a quarter.
Yeah, there is just a problem, though. Norska is running out of ammunition rather quickly now. it's really just the Marauder Ice Wolf chariots with their missile attacks left, and they don't really hit for that much damage. There's also a lot of elite infantry left for ice power, but they're low enough where there's a chance they might rout off before actually getting finished off in the battle.
Yeah, I think Viking needs to make full use of his battlefield control here, which he has absolute battlefield control. Ice Power has no way to dictate this game at all at this moment. So he should probably go and get a full surround with everything and come in for just this one big sort of collapse from all sides in order to try and get a mass route onto Ice Power's infantry. And I think if he can do that, the Viking is definitely in command of this game.
Yeah, although it can be pretty difficult actually routing off Blackguard of Nagaron. If we look at their actual stamina, it's quite high, which gives a bonus to their leadership. And you'll often see Blackguard fighting to the last model, very close to an unbreakable unit, as long as they don't take too much shock damage. Ice Power also right now opting to hold his position. This is perfectly legal, as he doesn't really have a chance to catch the Vikings units. And instead he's opting to take the rest of the missile fire just so that we can easily move on into the late game, which seems to be beginning now. We have 4 units of Skin Wolves that are actually still quite healthy. They have quite a bit of HP, and the Viking is going to have to find a way to actually break into this position. He has a lot of cavalry, which may be able to overwhelm the Blackguard, but if they do hold, we expect them to rampage and then just get caught up in a lot of these spear units. That could end very badly for the Viking, so let's see how this goes.
Yeah. I do think just trying to collapse the morale of maybe the weaker units of the Dark Elves, the Dread Spears especially in the back, might be a good start just to get your hand into the cookie jar, so to speak. Now, he will send in the Marauders into the front line first, which I do think they'll actually be dying quite quickly here. Ooh, but it's actually a bait for a boat, which it looks like will do some pretty substantial damage, especially into the Sisters of Singing Doom Witch Elves.
Yeah, however, they don't rout off. They do manage to stay together, and a big charge in from the Skin Wolves onto the cavalry actually has a lot of them getting caught up on infantry. None of them rampage though, and Marauder Horsemen are coming in to buy them space to retreat. It's very important that none of these troops rampage. However, since that's almost a death sentence here for the units of Norska.
Now we just have this huge ugly blob, which actually makes sense because the Viking is using some AoE buffs. Fight or Die giving massive melee attack to all of these Skinwolf units. So they're actually doing really well just ripping through these Witch Elves. And in fact, it's going to be army losses. Just all he really needed, it seems, was that AoE buff. And without any Soul Stealer to counteract it, the Viking's going to take the game.
Yeah, pretty decisive victory there, although a lot of that did come down to that pick on Marathi. Her dive in, just a little bit too risky and not able to escape. There were potentially 2 more Soul Stealers that could have gone down over the course of the battle. And the fact that she got taken out before that was a lot of damage lost on Ice Power's side. Getting into the game, second one against the Viking versus Ice Power. Greenskins against Skaven. Which faction would you like to cover?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and cover the Greenskins this time, just so that way we're each covering each guy once. So,
sounds good.
The Viking is coming in with Grand Lepanche, a front line of 5 regular goblins, very cheap. We have a Goblin Big Boss with They Need Stabbin', a Giant River Troll Hag with Spirit Leash, and it looks like, is that Aspect of the Dread Knight?
Let's see, it looks like it may very well be. Let's take a quick
Indeed
zoom
it
in.
is, which is, it's an alternative way of giving a little bit of more immune to psychology to your Stone Trolls, which he does have 2 of. He also has a couple of Snotling Pump Wagons with Flappas, definitely not a pick you see very often. Cool to see them here. He has, it looks like, a large skirmishing corps of Forest Goblin Spider Rider archers and Goblin Wolf archers, including the Morgrub's Mangy Marauders, the armor-piercing variant, as well as the Moonhowlers, Goblin Wolf Rider ROR, and a couple more spiders back with his main formation. So definitely a very cheap, very wide build with a lot of killing power in those Stone Trolls. So how about the Skaven?
Well, for the Skaven, we're seeing a pretty classic defensive build formation. You guys have seen it before. It's a lot of Skaven slaves along the front line, with clan rats holding the back. Many spears to deal with the cavalry that dives in behind. And for what they're actually protecting, it's going to be Poison Wind Mortars and a unit of Poison Wind Globadiers. For the mass of the Skaven, it's going to be Throt, coming in with the full kit, healing and summons, Hackmaster for even more regeneration, and 2 Rat Ogres, one even the ROR. 2 are also, there's also going to be 2 Wolf Rats, Poison variant for the higher damage, to cover the mobility front. And these could be very important for chasing off Stone Trolls, though I do expect the mobility game to be won by the Viking here. Now, quick question, Doctor. What makes the Pump Wagon Flappa variant better than the usual pump wagons?
I'll get back to you on that. I honestly can say that I have no idea.
Yeah, actually, same here. I believe it might be a little bit more AP, maybe a little bit more charge bonus. I do know I'm pretty sure these are the more expensive variants, going up to, I think, 650, but this is actually such a rare pick that you basically never see it in battles. And you don't really see pump wagons either, let alone the Flappa variant. Now, as the game gets started, we will begin with some skirmishing. The counter skirmish for Skaven is going to be the Poison Wind Mortars, Throt, and the Wolf Rats. He should be able to negate most of the damage on these Wolf Rider archers. I don't expect them to be firing in on Rat Ogres, and if they do, that would be some pretty impressive play coming in from the Viking, or maybe even a misplay from Ice Power. But
yeah,
generally,
we will see some nice dodging from the Wolf Rats with Poison from Ice Power. Now, the Viking posturing very aggressively with his Spider Rider archers, going in for the full surround pretty much right from the very beginning. And he's actually baiting out some mortar fire with Grom the Paunch. Definitely not the target they want to be firing at, as he can not only dodge it very easily, but also it won't do much damage even if it manages to hit. Instead, he's going to refocus on the Forest Goblin Spider Rider archers. Definitely a better target, though it looks like the first volley will be entirely dodged. Very impressive from the Viking. Now, the Viking's starting to move in quite aggressively. He is Spirit Leeching down some Poison Wind Gladiators and moving in, and it looks like he's going to begin firing in on them as well, trying to chip away at some of this killing power for the Skaven. After all, it's pretty much tied up in a couple of units, but now Grom going in very aggressively. He has to be wary of the Rat Ogre summon that could come out at any time. And now, in fact, looks like Throt going out quite aggressively, but he will pull back before anything major happens.
Yeah, both sides sort of just playing with their single entities, a little bit risky, but no major pains coming in. But a big engagement does begin onto the Flappas, actually taking a lot of damage on the initial charge. And Stone Trolls now alone with only a unit of goblins. Hackmaster and Throt will kill them pretty quickly, but Flappas are engaging into the backline.
Oh my god, these Poison and Globadiers are firing into just this massive blob of everything. I don't know which side is going to be taking more damage from them. But a lot of damage will be taken nonetheless. Now, it looks like the Flappas on one side have been doing quite well. And actually, the Plague Priest is starting to get sniped here in the center. This could be a huge play, as they need Stavin on top of it with a Goblin Big Boss and some Forest Goblin Spider Rider archers in melee on top of it. But it's not taking much damage.
Yeah, and let's see. Currently, it seems like the Skaven are holding decently well with their backline. The most important thing are the Poison Wind Mortars. And if they can keep firing into this large group of goblins and night goblins, that will be taking out the main line of the greenskins. But right now it's looking pretty rough for the Skaven. Right flank is falling, and the double brood horrors are posing quite the threat here.
Yeah, the Throt and the Packmaster in the back peeling off some chariots and now some Spider Riders, but they're going to need to go back in and deal with some of the bigger threats in this greenskin build. The stone trolls are both doing quite well, full leadership and relatively healthy. And these poison wind glavadiers have been getting spirit leech down, so they're on the verge of breaking without even being engaged in melee. And as soon as they break, the poison wind mortars will surely follow soon, as there's nothing really left to protect them.
Yeah, poison wind mortars having gone most of their value this game, there is a chance that after they rout, they'll come back and still cause a lot of problems. But right now with the mobility of the greenskins, it's looking like a pretty bad situation for Skaven. We are seeing one of the units of goblins routing off. And if he can rout off the second one, that could be a pretty nice place in the center here. He has rat ogres at high morale. And it looks like the double brood horror is actually going to be pulling out this center engagement.
Yeah,
it even
doing a very
actually
nice
swings the
job.
balance of power back into the Skaven side. And with the Stone Trolls now at low HP, they might even be out of the battle as long as the Pack Masters can keep routing them off.
Now, a big wall coming in. This could be where the Greenskins turn the game back in their favor. And also, you have to remember that the balance of power is largely the way it is because of some summons, both the Rat Ogre summons and some Plague Monk summons, which have dissipated. So it's back a little bit in the Greenskin favor, but the biggest favor for the Greenskins right now is the fact that they have all the battlefield control in the world. And for two low morale factions, that is a huge deal, just because it means that when the Skaven units rout, it's permanent. When the Greenskin units rout, they should be able to come back. And you can see the Packmaster taking a ton of damage. And if it routs, then I think this game is probably over, but it will just barely manage to stabilize here.
Yeah, getting
actually,
a solid charge on the Trolls, actually buffing up that leadership so he just barely holds.
Yeah, and you can actually see these Poison and Glavadiers have come back as well, and they're doing some decent chip damage into the Morgul's Mangy Marauders. I definitely think that the Viking wants to get over there and shut them down. Now, Throt is going fisticuffs with Grom the Paunch in the center here, but Grom has Stone Troll support. Now, the Packmaster coming back in, if the Viking loses Grom here, that might be a game loss, but in fact, the double Brood Horror, the leadership is starting to break. They don't have the greatest leadership to begin with, and you can see the Packmaster routes, and Throt looks like he might follow soon, and Ice Power, gotta pull it out, as it does seem like that single entity fight in the center was not going his way at all, and the Viking gonna take a quick 2-0 victory. Very impressive stuff.
Very, very surprising, but he had some good matchups. For the first game, just a big a misplay coming in from Ice Power, overextending, and the Viking really capitalizing on it. And for this game, really just feeling quite ahead for a good chunk of the battle. The double Brood Horror wasn't able to really snipe out their intended targets, and while they did rout off some of the Stone Trolls, sadly was not enough for anyone rooting for Ice Power. And very well played to the Viking. So wow, there we go. The Stone Trolls actually did get a lot of value there. And Grom too never really felt like he was too threatened.
Yeah, the double Brood Horror, it's a very meta pick. They're very strong. They're very safe. But what they kind of lack a little bit of is killing power. And you saw that in that game. They were running around, and yeah, they were picking good engagements, and they made good use of Throt summons. But at the end of the day, they just didn't really have enough in them to hard carry the game.
So for the semifinals, the Viking moving on up along with Felix will be bringing Greenskins getting countered by the Lizardmen. For the Vikings build, he has brought a front line of goblins, seemingly a favorite of his, as we have seen it taken 2 games in a row now, with a secondary line of Orc Big Guns, very nice with their anti-large against big Lizardmen monsters, and of course Night Goblins ROR for their fanatics. His mobility going to be a small skirmisher core with some with some boar boys and squig hoppers, so not especially strong there, but his main power is going to be coming in from his core. He's brought 2 giants with him, and also his lord is going to be Wurzag to snare down any targets that he wants to snipe out, presumably with the giants. some archers too for some extra damage, and it's looking like a pretty interesting build. Very suited for that monster fight. Now for the Lizardmen, what do we have?
So, for the Lizardmen, we do have Lord Mazdamundi on top of Zlak, the Ancient Stegodon. Then we have a couple of Pterodon riders in the sky, some Cold One Spear riders, including the Hawk cohort, I think is how you say that, in the back. We do have the Umbral Tide Salamander Hunting Pack ROR with Stalk and Snipe. We have a couple of Skink cohorts, and then we have a big, meaty front line of Saurus Warriors, also with the cohort of Sotek Red Crested Skink ROR in the center. So, pretty balanced build here, actually. A little bit of skirmish elements, a little bit of monster play, and quite a bit of big infantry power.
Yeah, I would expect the Lizardmen to come up on top in the infantry fight, as they usually do, especially with the supporting spells of Mazdamundi. But with the two giants as single entities, how are you feeling like this single entity fight might go?
Well, if Mazdamundi gets caught up with the two giants, he will surely be taking a lot of damage quite quickly. Mazdamundi on Zlak, more of an anti-infantry specialist than an anti-monster duelist, so he'll probably want to avoid that type of engagement. I am actually concerned a little bit for Felix, just how he'll actually go about taking out the giants. He doesn't have any skinks. The only real anti-large missile play he has is with the Umbral Tide. Now, if the Umbral Tide can fire in undisturbed, they will surely do a lot of damage. However, there is a lot of ranged power on the Greenskin side with those two Orc Arrow Boys in the back there.
Yeah, and the Umbral Tide don't have too much range either, though they'll have to be careful with how much they decide to push up. Although they're actually targeting down the Orc Arrow Boys, and we'll have to see how that goes. A nice juke from the Red Crested Skinks actually avoids the first spell from the Greenskins, and Mazdamundi's actually getting some free charges while the Giants are deciding to stay safe in the early parts of the battle.
Yeah, and actually, Mazdamundi getting back onto the Orc Arrow Boys, but now Effigy to get coming in. Will there be enough mass to actually pin Mazdamundi in place? Because that's a pretty big spell. And it looks like he might be able to just escape without taking any damage from it. We'll have to see. Ooh, the Giants taking a ton of damage there, by the way, from the Umbral Tide, who are managing to fire in relatively undisturbed at this point, somewhat surprisingly. Man, you can see just huge damage with every volley. The Greenskins definitely need to make it a priority to shut down those Salamanders, but now they will get an Orc Boar Boy back onto them. However, the Pakapak cohort going to be peeling off these Boar Boys, allowing the Umbral Tide to presumably live to fight another day.
Yeah, nevertheless, Mazdamundi does actually take a few hits on the retreat, making that engage from the Giants not completely a waste. And as long as the Salamanders can't get too many volleys on them, then the Vikings should be feeling pretty comfortable. Except there is the main problem, though, that the Goblins are beginning to rout off on the right and well, mostly just the right hand side of the flank. However, on the left hand side, if the Goblins do manage to hold, then that actually gives a nice anchor for the Viking to defend with. However,
yeah, now a big net coming in. It won't actually be doing that much, and it won't be catching out Wurzag, so there's no risk of Wurzag getting sniped out here. It will allow the Umbral Tide to fire in some onto the Giants, but I do think that Wurzag should probably be a priority at this point for the Lizardmen to snipe down.
Yeah, and we are seeing Mazdamundi charge in, but he thinks better of it, given that the Giants are still quite close, and Felix decides to continue firing in on the Giants, but the returning Boar Boys coming back. That is really rough. Salamander's getting shut down by this for the second time in this game by a relatively cheap unit too. And as you've seen, the Salamanders are a win condition here for Felix. If they go down, there's not a whole lot that can really fight these Giants.
Yeah, and the Giants still both quite healthy. About 11,000 HP between the two of them. Definitely something that Mazdamundi cannot deal with by himself. Now, these Coldon Spear Riders are getting on top of them, and they actually should do quite nicely. And the Salamanders back online, firing in. The two Giants are at some risk of being picked off here, and if that happens, then this game is swinging back in the favor of the Lizardmen. However, the Durkat Squigs could perhaps get back onto the Salamander hunting back. They definitely need to quite quickly.
Mazdamundi is nearby. He will be able to support, but just not in time, as the Salamanders do take quite a bit of damage. It is so important that they stay alive to finish off the Giants, since the Greenskins too don't have a ton of options for Mazdamundi either. It'll really come down to how well these single entities live, but the Salamanders are getting quite low, but at pretty high leadership, despite the situation.
Yeah, I do expect them to be breaking here in just a moment, or killed off completely, I guess, if that's what it takes. I am a bit concerned also because there is still a unit of, or 2 units of Orc Error Boys, one very low, but one full HP, and they actually have really solid AP values, so if they're left alone against Mazdamundi at the end of the game, they should be able to shred him quite effectively.
Yeah, the single entity fight would have to go quite well for the Lizardmen. For him to actually be able to shut down the Orc Archer Boys, as he doesn't really have a lot of cavalry left. If you're just taking stock of the Lizardmen forces, 1 unit of spears, Mazdamundi at half HP, and the Salamanders just about routing off. Another effigy of the Git comes down, and that's going to be a lot of free damage on Mazdamundi.
Yeah, and the entire rest of the build has been pretty much completely destroyed. So with Mazdamundi by himself here, I do definitely expect this game to be going in favor of a Viking. With some really solid play. Doing a great job of getting into the backline and shutting down the Salamander hunting pack, and just a really solid build too.
Yeah, nevertheless, things could still swing into the favor of the Lizardman, even though it is looking quite rough. But he has to really make sure that he takes no hits from the Giants. Any hits will bring Mazdamundi very close to routing. And even Wurzhag going into the melee looks like he might rout off Mazdamundi himself. And there we go, leadership dipping very close to 0, but it's still in the positives, and Mazdamundi will be able to continue to fight, but he's not facing the Giants, which means that he won't really be able to land any solid hits on top of them.
Yeah, Harmonic Convergence and Cold-Blooded going down. Felix definitely giving it his all. However, it does seem like he's just too far behind. Army losses are going to hit, and the Viking is going to take the first game.
Yeah, a little bit of damage getting taken on the Giants during the early game, but for the rest of the game, they were pretty safe. Some really nice engages onto the Salamander hunting pack, really showing that he knew his win conditions, and from there, it was a pretty straightforward victory. He had the single entity lead, and with the infantry sort of trading equally on both sides, that was enough to pull out that victory.
Bit more familiar with their side of this matchup. So we have Volkmar the Grim coming in with his standard kit. We have an Amber Wizard with Transformation of Kadan, and it looks like Amber Spear. We have a couple of Outriders. We have a pair of Great Cannons, neither of them being the ROR though. We have 2 looks like Great Swords, interestingly enough. Gonna try to clear out some chaff that way, I guess. We have some Halberdiers, a bunch of Spearmen with shields. It looks like 5 in total. And that pretty much rounds out the build. So very, very straight up. Nothing crazy here. Pretty much what you might expect. How about the Lizardmen?
Yep, actually an interesting thing to note before we head on to the Lizardmen. There is actually a chevron on about all of the infantry troops. I just thought that was a little bit interesting.
Maybe they've been in battle before.
Yeah, we'll see if that comes into play. Now for the Lizardmen side, it's looking like a pretty thin front line actually. Just 2 units of Skinks, 1 being the Red Crested, and 2 units of Saurus Warriors. And that's it. A little bit worrisome actually for the Lizardmen, since they do need to win that infantry fight. Because they have a lot of cavalry that they need to support, mostly Cold One Riders. and a lot of skink skirmishers. They've also brought with them 2 feral bastiladons and a solar engine, and Tic-Tac-Toe himself, bringing in his special rock drop ability, quite damaging, a pretty good AoE, and focus, instincts also, a different way of stopping rampage, actually an AoE effect, but with much less range, generally less useful. Skink Priest of Heavens, surely with the Wind Blast, and also the Thunderbolt ability. Good versus cavalry, but in this case, I'm expecting more Wind Blasts push through the infantry line. So, this Lizardman build does definitely feel pretty off meta just based on how little infantry there is, but the double feral Bastiladon should be able to dive into the back line, given that there isn't a whole ton of ranged pressure for Empire, really just the Amber Wizard.
Yeah, now let me just check one thing real quick.
Sure. So, the Chameleon Skinks, we do expect them to actually push back these Outriders. Even though they do have bonus range, the stealth of the Skinks are able to get them close enough to these Outriders so that they're actually able to fire off onto them. So, in that sense, the skirmishing will be mostly negated, and the Skinks will likely be able to pick off a few of the Empire infantry troops too. Although, yeah.
So there is a rule break on Viking side with the build. There are 3 Bastiladons in total, and it's max 2. They do count as the same units, so.
Okay, all right. Well, that is interesting.
I suppose we'll just have to play the game out, and if the Viking wins, we'll just have to redo it.
Yeah. That will have to be the case. That is actually pretty interesting. I would not have expected that, but of course, it is on the responsibility of the players to make sure that their builds are legal before every game. Now, going into the matchup, though, this is still a chance for Felix to get a free win here if he does manage to pull through. And how do you feel like, what do you think his victory conditions are here?
I think it's really just clearing out the chaff with Volkmar, and if he's able to do that, then I don't think the Lizardmen have enough killing power with their single entities and their cavalry to grind through all this infantry. Now, it's also an interesting deployment from the Empire. They've kind of boxed around this patch of forest here. I do wonder if they'll be able to actually draw some units into the forest as the fighting goes on, which I'm sure they'd love to do. But it's kind of on Viking to allow that to happen at the same time. So a really nice Grand Soulfire, by the way, doing a ton of damage to the Raid Crested Skinks ROR, but a Wind Blast coming in, and looks like doing okay damage to the Sigmar Sons, but also hitting some of the Coldon Riders here in the center.
A big banishment does go down, though, on top of that, on top of the cavalry, though. And it's looking to be quite effective, although it does miss a lot of the Saurus warriors. Volkmar, too, is actually getting surrounded. But do you think he is actually in much danger here?
No, Volkmar is just ridiculously tanky, and Bastiladons have more mass and terror than they actually have killing power in melee, so he should be just fine here, I think. Even if Tic-Tac-Toe comes in, I don't expect him to be taking too much damage too quickly. Now, the Empire is overextending a bit with their Spearmen on the one flank, trying to chase off some Chameleon Skinks. They are zoning successfully, but getting pretty far away from the formation. Now, one of the Coldon Riders has actually rampaged. It will get unrampaged, but then immediately break. And these Coldon Riders also coming in, and it looks like they want to pick off these Spearmen that have overextended a bit. But good play from Felix. He's pulling them back into the main formation, and it looks like they might be able to escape with their lives.
However, the Coldon Riders are moving in to intercept. They will be getting surrounded, but instead, actually, the Spear Cold Ones are moving into the backline of the Empire, choosing to chase off the Outriders instead. And the Outriders are very important for actually sniping out single entities here. Big Wind Blast down the center, but it looks like Empire is actually holding out pretty well here.
Yeah, they're doing a good job. They have most of their infantry left over. They've done a good job of summoning Manticores and getting some decent value with those. and it looks like one of the Bastillodons is going down entirely, and the other one down to half HP. And the cannons are actually still online and firing at this solar engine, which is getting quite low, and that's a lot of the killing power um, for this Lizardman build at this point. However, one Great Cannon finally gets shut down. The other one, basically in melee range of this Feral Bastillodon, if the Bastillodon is able to get on top of them, maybe this solar engine can be saved, which would be a huge play.
We're seeing a big play now, though, from Volkmar, actually charging straight into the side of Saurus Warriors, throwing in a Grand Soulfire, and that's looking like that's the last of the Lizardmen infantry now. Actually getting basically killed off entirely by Volkmar.
Yeah, and that's what Volkmar offers in this build. He will just kill infinite infantry if he's left alone to do so. Just crazy effective against that unit type. Now, the Skank Priest of Heavens with Wind Blast is actually probably the biggest element of infantry killing power remaining in this Lizardman build, but it's actually getting focused down by Volkmar right now, and it's down to half HP.
Yeah, although he does manage to escape, and Volkmar does have more pressing issues to go for, instead opting for the Saurus Warriors, just because having that infantry advantage is huge. They'll be able to take down Feral Bastillodons and Tic-Tac-Toe no problem. They'll be able to finish off the Chameleon Skinks, and as long as they stay healthy, there's not too much to worry about for Felix. Volkmar does overextend just a tiny bit, though, and leave some of his troops behind, but it might not even matter. They rout off the Bastillodon on their own, and even some Outriders have finally come back into the battle.
The Outriders punting the Skink Priest away.
Yeah, they actually did a few hundred damage just based off the fall damage from knocking him down the hill. So a pretty efficient charge into them, but they will be getting chased off by Tic-Tac-Toe.
Yeah, though it looks like the Empire is pretty decisively ahead in this game. The Chameleon Skinks are pretty much out of ammo, and there really isn't any infantry killing power left on the Lizardman side that will be able to take out this huge mass of anti-large infantry.
Yeah, and a very important sign here is the balance of power. Usually the main thing that will shift it are spells and ranged troops, but given that a lot of the Lizardmen forces will have to engage in melee against the Empire, it means that the balance of power quite accurately reflects the actual situation of the battle, as we are seeing mass routes coming in from many of the Lizardmen forces, even their Feral Bastillodons too. And with just one unit of cavalry left and some skinks, honestly, I feel like Volkmar could almost solo the rest of the Lizardmen forces. Just a little bit of support.
Yeah, just a little bit of support. As long as he has Grand Slowfire for the Coldman Riders, I think there's a very real possibility of that. Now, the balance of power actually evens out quite a bit, as a few of the Empire troops overextend slightly, and the Lizardmen are doing a great job of picking them off. And actually, these two Chameleon Skinks, with quite a bit of ammo coming in, it looks like they were some reserves, or maybe being chased off by something earlier, but they might be able to do some huge damage onto the halberds.
Yeah, like we said, Volkmar is pretty good, but alone, he is in a little bit more of a rough position. There is a situation where these Chameleon Skinks could finish off the rest of the Empire infantry, and from there, just a surround on Volkmar could win it. He does have some spears. He could cycle charge with Tic-Tac-Toe. So there's a little bit of a worry there. We'll have to see how the rest of the ammunition is used on the Chameleon Skinks.
Yeah, firing in onto halberds is definitely a good call. They're relatively low morale, and they have terrible stats against missiles. Almost no armor, no shields. So they will be taking a ton of damage there.
Yeah, the artillery crew routing off also means that there won't be any more ranged from the Empire. It's just Volkmar and his infantry. Nevertheless, still quite scary. He's been regenerating and is now at full HP. But the Skinks will be able to rout off at least one unit of halberds by the looks of it.
Yeah, now the Coldon Riders going in on top of the Spearmen here, trying to get a nice pick. This is actually definitely a very strong play. However, the Spearman's morale is holding for now, and an Amber Spear onto Tic-Tac-Toe whiffs completely at short range. Very unfortunate for the Empire. That could have been a big turning point in this game, but instead, Tic-Tac-Toe will remain relatively healthy, as actually this Coldon Rider getting quite a few models shipped off. Maybe a bit ambitious to go onto those spearmen, though I do really like the idea of the play.
Yeah, just not really paying off. They get stuck on the new mass changes for the infantry, and they have a pretty difficult disengage. They're only at 12 models left, and that's low enough where they're likely to get terror routed by Volkmar. However, a big charge from another unit of Cold One Riders comes in, and they actually get some pretty nice damage on Halberdiers, just barely not bracing in time.
Actually, a little bit of a misplay. They were braced, and then they, it seems like, got an attack order. Perhaps a control plus a right-click situation onto those Golden Riders, as it looked like the entire army moved at once. But yeah, the Chameleon Skinks are starting to run low-ish on ammo, and as they fire in, the balance of power gets more and more in the favor of the Empire.
Yeah, it's just going to come down to a big melee engagement now, but the fact that there is a unit of half HP Cold One Riders could swing things very heavily for the Lizardmen. There's a chance that some cycle charges into the back of these great swords or spearmen, given how low their HP is, could just rout them off immediately, especially with the terror from the feral Bastiladons.
Oh,
and
Amber
Spear does come down though, and does a few hundred damage. That could be a huge swing play. Taking out the terror for the Lizardmen is very strong. And yeah, I think that's the last source of Lizardmen terror, if I'm not incorrect. Just taking that out means that the remainder of the infantry here will be able to do quite well.
Yeah, somehow, someway, tic-tac-toe doesn't cause terror. People aren't that scared of him, it seems.
Yeah, apparently not, but the Bastiladon just barely hanging on. And now we're heading on to the very late game situation with the Cold One Riders. Now moving back and presumably just waiting for a better opportunity to engage. Let's see here. We're seeing a little bit more lag. We'll just wait for that. And how do you feel about the game situation right now?
I do think that the Empire is ahead in this game. Volkmar is so good in these late game situations, and he is full health, absolutely full health. We don't see his regen cap yet. I'd have to check that once the lag dissipates a bit. But I definitely think that the Empire is in the better situation in this game.
Yeah, just a high HP Lord is very important. And there aren't a whole lot of things that can actually finish off Volkmar at this point. Earlier, it would have been a surround from the Cold One Riders, plus some hits from the Bastiladon and Tic-Tac-Toe. But the Bastiladon's really beat up. There's only one unit of Cold One Riders left, really. So I feel like there's not too much to worry about here.
So we can see Viking managing to dodge the Amber Spear by flying in a straight line, and in fact almost turns back into it, but just barely avoids that. And the Chameleon Skinks firing in under the Halberdiers, doing some good damage, but they are almost out of ammo. Now, it is worth reminding the chat that if the Viking manages to pull this out, the game won't count. So the players don't know that right now. But if that does end up happening, that surely would be a bit demoralizing, given how long and how close this game has been.
Yeah, it's been a very hard-fought victory. And we'll see if he does actually manage to pull through here. It's been a very close game. And the real rough part is that Felix would also be able to restructure his army. But nevertheless, before we get to that situation, the Viking will have to actually pull out a win. And with Felix advancing onto the Lizardmen forces, we'll have to see if that's going to be possible. Volkmar leading the charge with his spearmen. Everything at a decently high leadership in the center. But the backline of the Empire could very well break now that we're seeing these Cold One Riders coming in too.
Yeah, now big AoE buffs coming in from Volkmar. And the big AoE spells coming in as well are going to do some huge damage to Chameleon Skinks. And it does look like the Empire is pretty low in terms of morale here. Volkmar might get left alone, and if he does, then it's very possible that the Lizardmen will be able to drag him down. However, Tic-Tac-Toe getting terrified, and we are approaching army losses as it looks like the Empire are going to hold firm. So very well played there from the Empire, just managing to grind out a very long game and tie this series up at 1-1.
Yeah, and yeah, that game clocked in over 15 minutes, and that really did swing it into the favor of Volkmar though. He was basically at full HP the whole game, and after clearing up a lot of the infantry of the Viking, he was just able to clean out the rest, moving on into the late game. A little bit of a scary situation with the infantry nearly routing off, but uh, but yeah, just barely able to keep it together. There were also some really big hits on Tic-Tac-Toe near the end of the game there, and that's what really broke the Lizardman leadership at the end.
Well, I guess I will go ahead and cover the Vikings since I covered Felix last game. So, we do have the Fey Enchantress, double Paladin on horseback, it looks like. Or is that just... Yes, double Paladin, one is hiding. We have, it looks like a single field... No, double field Trebuchet. Quad Questing Knights, including the Companions of Canel ROR. We have a double Peasant Bowman with Pox Arrow. A bunch of Spearmen at Arms with Shields, 5 in total. Quad Peasant Mob, and that looks to be the entire build. So how about the Bretonnians of Felix?
Well, Felix has also brought his own army of peasants and men-at-arms, but instead of spears, he's gone for polearms, and also a few with shield and sword. So slightly better on the infantry versus infantry fight, and the polearms holding out the flanks slightly better than the spears. He has also brought himself 2 units of Peasant Bowman Pox Arrows, very standard, but no trebuchets, instead opting for a more elite cavalry corps. The Knights of the Realm, actually a little bit less elite, but bringing in 2 Grail Knights in the forest to be hitting much harder. He also has double Paladin and the Fey Enchantress with actually Shield of Thorns as opposed to the Vikings. No, they both have Shield of Thorns. So almost a complete mirror on both sides. One of them has trebuchets, the other has slightly more elite infantry. But otherwise, I'd expect a very fun cavalry fight coming in. For the actual deployments, though, we are seeing, since the Viking does have trebuchets, he is more prone to going for a tighter formation, and we are seeing that here. While Felix, wanting to command the mobility, has gone wider. Now, the Knights of the Realm and Knights of the Lion-Hearted, how well do they trade into the Questing Knights here? I feel like they might have a pretty hard time.
So, I do think, in terms of the cavalry fight in general, the Viking will definitely be at an advantage without any spells being used, especially over the course of a longer grind, because the majority of the Vikings, or the majority of Felix's damage is in shock damage. However, Felix has a lot of magic damage and a lot of physical resist, whereas the Viking isn't going to be getting very much use out of Shield of Thorns, just because of the amount of magic damage on Felix's side. So I do think with good spell casting, that might be enough to flip the cavalry fight in favor of Felix here.
Yeah, those trebuchets are pretty scary versus the Grail Knights, however. And if they do clump up, that might just end the game right then and there. However, moving through the forest will keep them nice and shielded and hidden until we head on into the mid-game. Trebuchets are firing in onto the infantry of Felix too, but so far not getting too much damage, as is expected with trebuchets.
Yeah, they are very inaccurate. When they do hit, they do pretty good damage. But firing in at infantry is not really their forte. They are a little bit better at firing in on artillery and large targets, especially cavalry. So ideally, they'll be able to swap over to the Grail Knights as they do become unhidden for just a minute here. But they will hop back into the forest and probably be relatively immune to trebuchet fire for a minute there.
Yeah, a big hit onto those pox arrows, so nearly routing them off with just one hit, but it looks like they just barely managed to keep it together.
Yeah, and that actually had more to do, I think, with peasant woman leadership than anything. Their leadership, quite pathetic. If you pretty much breathe on them, they will decide to turn and run.
Yeah, and that could change the tides of things here as the battle does get underway. Felix's army will will fare better in a straight up fight against the forces of the Viking, but with the cavalry coming in to support, that can easily change things onto the Viking side. But that does leave his right flank a little bit open to these Grail Knights who are charging into the Questing Knights. He also has his Paladins in a better position, and this could be the huge swing play already.
Yeah, now the trebuchets are only being protected by cavalry, so it might be pretty easy for Felix to force a cavalry fight here, relatively unsupported by the infantry, which would be in his advantage, assuming that the trebuchets aren't able to get any damage onto these Grail Knights before the battle starts.
Yeah, Paladins are moving very aggressively from Felix, and that's because he wants to try to bait a charge, but neither player really biting. And we're just seeing a straight up cavalry fight go down now. Shield of Thorns being casted. And we're seeing the Questing Knights just really melting here, but trading decently into the Grail Knights.
Yeah, now the Shield of Thorns is quite big. Between that and Favor of the Fae, there is a total of 42% physical resist for a lot of this Bretonnian cavalry, or Felix's cavalry. Now, actually, the Fae's Comet coming down. Oh my god. Ooh, it might actually hit Viking. Oh my god, it hits Viking and does a ton of damage.
A much stronger Comet coming down. I even missed it myself, and that's a huge rout from two very expensive Questing Knights.
Oh my god, yeah, this is really smart actually. Taking mass magic damage to circumvent the Favor of the Fae and the Shield of Thorns physical resist, and the Vikings cavalry is pretty much gone completely.
Yeah, taking some very clean engagements on the cavalry front. Just edging out there, and like I said earlier, the frontline fight for Felix is going to be pretty strong for him too. They're slowly pushing through, and even getting on top of those peasant bowmen now. Nevertheless, yeah. Both archers on both sides are pretty shut down. And yeah, it's just a big surround on the single entities now of the Viking. Alright, so Dactor, tell me, is there anything the Viking can do to come back from this situation?
No. I mean, I guess theoretically, if Faye somehow tanked these Grail Knights for like 20 years, she could drain them all down. But yeah, I don't see that happening. And man, I really did not expect this game to be decided by Comet usage of things. Definitely an ability that doesn't often get value, especially against cavalry. But Viking just maybe not able to see it or having a short lapse in micro does feel the full effects of that ability, and it will, in conjunction with a nice Shield of Thorns and some nice tech picks, decide this game.
Yeah, and man, did it decide that game. If you just look at the cavalry for the Viking, all of them at basically no HP, under 500 damage value for most of them, while Felix, his Grail Knights, getting in over 1,000. Just, wow, just a hugely decisive play there. And yeah, we saw him too. He just barely managed to dodge the first comet that came down, and landing his own, really just securing out that victory. A very quick game. And I guess now we'll be moving on to the second semifinals. So getting into the game, Felix as Empire, Papa Palpatine as Beastmen. Front lines are moving in to engage as quickly as possible. Pistoliers have secured the right flank, and we're seeing a wheel away from the Beastmen forces, since Felix knows that his troops can get surrounded and easily routed if they were to take an engagement there. So,
yeah, and also there's no ranged power on the Beastman side at all. So these Pistoliers are going to be relatively undisturbed, and ideally for the Empire, they'll be able to get full value before the main engagement starts. However, looks like the Empire may be a little bit impatient here, starting to move in with their Flagellants and Sigmar Sons into the Gore Herd.
Yeah, nevertheless, a decent trade. And the fact that the Beastmen don't have missiles is actually pretty scary given that Volkmar is here. If he gets surrounded by Khazrak and the Chariot Corps, he will take a pretty hard beating. But we'll have to see if that goes down. Now, we're seeing a lot of cavalry actually just running straight into each other, but the Empire do have a minor advantage here in the spears, and we're seeing immediately the Warhounds get routed off, and the Empire Knights trading evenly with Razor Core Herd.
Yeah, the Empire Knights buffed up by Volkmar, so they're actually doing quite well into the Razor Gourds, especially with some spear support. And on the one flank, the Empire is starting to collapse, but in general, I think they're getting the better trades at the beginning of this battle.
Yeah, trading specifically into the mobility of Beastmen and losing your infantry is generally quite good in this type of matchup. Centaurs charging into spears too, getting in decent damage, but now that they're actually stuck in the fight, will be trading inefficiently. And it's a big blob up in the center now. Manticore summon 2, which means Volkmar will have to be a little bit careful. If he gets sniped out, that could actually spell out the game right then and there. But he's charging straight into the Beastmen forces, and if he gets a Grand Soulfire there, that would actually be insane. Looks like it's on cooldown though, and instead he's just using his charge damage.
Yeah, the Beastmen starting to route off across the battlefield a little bit. Now, Khazrak is trying to snipe out the Jade Wizard here, but the Jade Wizard is on horseback, so not going to be taking too much damage, I think, too quickly. Well, I say that, but 2 hits come in very rapidly from Khazrak. And, wow, a third one even, which is quite surprising, given the melee attack. And actually, the Jade Wizard is routing. Khazrak just taking it down so quickly. That's pretty wild. That might actually be a pretty big swing in this battle.
Yeah, although he decides not to chase, the Jade Wizard might come back. And he still has a pretty good cavalry lead. It's just that the constant spirit leeches will definitely be a problem. However, they are surrounding the 2 chariots, and without Khazrak there to support, the Empire Knights should trade out pretty well there. Pistoliers are hunting down the rest of the Centaurs. They do actually catch one of the Pistoliers, but they'll be getting taken out. And it's looking like a pretty heavy mobility advantage for the Empire. But balance of power is still pretty even. Volkmar's taken a lot of damage, and the Butchers of Kalkengard are quite a big threat here. There's not a whole lot that can deal with them.
Yeah, and actually the Jade Wizard being chased off by the Chaos Warhounds in the back. So nice play by Palpatine, understanding that Khazrak has other places that he'd like to be, and instead just using the cheaper Warhound unit in order to chase off that caster. However, Khazrak kind of getting caught up in the middle of a bunch of Empire Knights here. He definitely wants to get some more support from infantry, and actually a big Alpha Strike onto the Butchers of Kalkengard as well from the Empire Knights, as well as Volkmar, could be a big play here for the Empire to begin winning this game.
Yeah, counterplay comes down though. Manticore summon, a big banishment on top of the infantry for the Beastmen. But the Manticore could swing things hugely in the favor for the Beastmen. It routes off all the Empire Knights, and now it's Volkmar surrounded by Butchers and a Manticore. Definitely not a great situation to be in. And Beastmen actually take the lead in balance of power, but they're out of infantry now. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of Empire unbreakable troops here to back up Volkmar. And that may be the swing play Empire needs. We'll have to see. Butchers actually get quite low. It looks like Volkmar just really doing well in that fight with the support of the spears. And suddenly, I think once again, we're moving back into an Empire favored fight here. Depending on how the single entity duels go.
Yeah, Volkmar definitely needs to be taken out here, but there just isn't that much to kill him at this point. It's pretty much just the Manticore, and once that expires, it's really just going to be these single entity chariots, which don't do that much damage onto Volkmar. The Butchers of Kalkengard getting taken out was such a huge play, and all the Razor Wars are also down for the count. So all of the high mass, high damage Beastmen units pretty much getting picked off by this point.
Yeah, it's really just Kazrak and that Beast Caster now, but he's used up both of his Manticores. So that would be the rest of the Beastmen Winds of Magic if the Bray Shaman of Death does get chased off. Kazrak could fight out against Volkmar, but he does need a pretty favored engagement to do so. And the fact that Volkmar still has Terror too is really bad for the Beastmen mobility that is charging in now. They'll easily get routed off by him, but at the very least they'll be able to clear out the infantry along the fringes. Felix doing the same thing, just clearing out infantry, and this should be ending off the mid game, heading into the late game. Just trying to regroup forces and cleaning up the rest of the routing troops. Mobility for the Beastmen is still strong, but that's about all they have left. Not a lot of infantry. For Empire, it's the opposite. They have infantry, but only one unit of Pistoliers for their mobile forces.
Yeah, now it's a good job by the Beastmen to pick off these isolated units where they can. They'll definitely need to do a good job of that to have any chance in this battle, given that they are in a disfavored state in general. Now, Apocalyptic Vision coming down for this fight should be quite nice. The Pistolier should be getting taken out quite quickly. And Volkmar coming in now a little bit late. He will tear out off one unit of Centaurs, and the Chaos Warhounds with Poison, not really a unit with a ton of killing power. More just there to chase off units. They're going to really struggle to take out all of this infantry, and Kazrak kind of needs to hard carry this game.
Yeah, now we've seen it before. The single entity fight could go very well in the favor of Kazrak, but a pretty unlikely situation. He goes straight up onto Volkmar, and now there's going to be a little bit of RNG with pretty high favor for the Empire. Two remaining chariots coming in from the distance, but they won't be able to make it back in time. And it looks like Kazrak is about to get finished off here.
Yeah, and with that, the Empire takes a decisive lead on the balance of power and in the game. I would certainly expect them to close this one out here, and for Felix to take the 1-0 lead in this final.
And there we go, ending off with a great Grand Soulfire. A pretty nice win. It got a little bit dicey there, especially into the mid game with the Manticore summons routing off the cavalry. I think that worked out pretty well, but the Knights of the Blazing Sun, just looking at that damage value, they more than paid for themselves, which is really nice on a cavalry unit. Pistoliers doing really well too, and Volkmar with 3200 damage value.
Yeah, honestly, not that atypical for Volkmar in this matchup, as silly as it sounds. He is such a hard carry here. Very, very nice usage of the Pistoliers as well. They all paid for themselves quite a bit over. So, very strong. It was an interesting build from Felix, actually. Normally, with that much infantry and chaff, you would see foot archers like Huntsmen. But instead, opting for the Pistoliers just to ensure that they'll be safe the whole time and able to fire in and get all of their ammo out before they die. And it worked out very well, so.
Yeah, so well played to Felix. And here we go for the second match against Felix and Palpatine. We are seeing the Dwarves coming in with the Runesmith, Felix, and Grombrindle. Very heavy single entity squad. Nice for dueling out against Sigvald, as long as you can get all three on top of him. There's also the Gyrocopter Air Squad with 2 Gyro Bombers and 2 Brimstone Guns. Extremely effective versus chariots, but not as good against horsemen. They'll still trade out pretty well, but the problem is that you generally run out of ammunition. To deal with elite infantry though, they do have their bombs, and we'll be keeping a close eye on that to see if they're effective. Some Dragonback Slayers just to make sure no chariots can run into the back line, but that may be pretty unlikely. The Iron Breakers are very hard to break, and the Dwarf Warriors are positioned in the back. Presumably they will hold out a tiny bit longer. I think this is just about within legal limits, so no worries about that. And with all that out of the way, what do we have for Chaos?
So for Chaos, we have Sartorial the Everwatcher coming in with Searing Doom, and it looks like Plague of Rust. We have a front line with a bunch of Chaos Marauders and Chaos Marauders with great weapons, just a ton of chaff spam. Quad Gore Beast Chariot, and double Exalted Hero atop a Manticore. Now, I think I've actually seen this exact build from Palpatine in the Legendary Lords tournament against Grom Brindal's dwarves, and it seemed very effective there. And actually, Call Harmon also saying in chat that Palpatine using this same build against him as well. So it seems like this build very practiced for Palpatine.
Yeah, and I didn't actually know you could bring Quad Gore Beast Chariot, but it is indeed legal. And if they can actually jump on top of the Dwarf Warriors, I expect them to route extremely quickly. They'll do really well versus the Iron Breakers. And in the beginning skirmishing phases, we're seeing the Exalted Heroes distracting the Gyrocopters, but he's taking a lot of damage, and if he routes off early, that's a pretty big loss for Papa Palpatine.
Yeah, I actually think that this build from Felix is very well suited for this. The Hero Squad is not going to take any kind of damage from the Gore Beast Chariots, really. They might get knocked around, but they will survive for quite some time, and that will buy a lot of time for the Gyrocopters to get full value here, as aside from these Exalted Heroes, there's nothing to counter them, and the Exalted Heroes will eventually be kited out, assuming proper control from Felix.
Yeah, and while we're seeing an Overcast, not Searing Doom, but the missile ability coming in from Sartorial, it breaks the charge defense of the Iron Breakers, which should help out a bit, but they'll still hold for a really long time. It's still real relying on these Gore Beast Chariots. What's it? Papa Palpatine is on a timer, and he needs to get as much damage as possible with the Gore Beast Chariots before his two Exalted Heroes die.
Now, one of the Gyrocopters actually got terrified by the routing Exalted Hero, but it comes back, which is actually quite huge. Really needing all the ammunition he can get from those units in order to win this game. Now, they should be able to, I think, take out Sartorial over the course of this game, though he does have quite a bit of missile resist, so I wonder if he'll focus on the Gore Beast Chariots instead.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, his hero squad could very well take out Sartorial, but it could go either way based on who is able to get charges off. And with the Gyrocopters at low ammunition, the Gore Beast Chariots may very well just tank out the rest of the game. Of course, they'll still have to worry about Slayers. Just that there are still 3 of them, with only 2 of them at half HP. It could go either way. A really nice hit though on Felix though, knocks him very far away from the other single entities here, and Sartorial will be able to finish him off, if not rout him.
Yeah, that is a huge play, actually. That is exactly how you deal with this type of hero squad with Felix. Felix is the weak link, so you just try and isolate him with a high mass unit, push him away, and kill him. Now, with that being said, the dwarves are pulling ahead on the balance of power, and these Gyrocopters are pretty much all online and healthy, and they still have quite a bit of ammo, so they should be able to kill off Sartorial over the course of the game. And with that, I really don't think that this super cheap frontline of Chaos will be able to drag down the single entities of the dwarves.
Yeah, and not to mention the Iron Breakers are just barely holding on to. And if any Iron Breakers survive, that's going to be extremely difficult for Chaos to actually finish them off. Their infantry is not nearly elite enough to kill him, but he does have still a few Gore Beast Chariots, and we'll see if they're able to run them down. However, they're getting quite battered by the air army of the Dowie. There's still a Gyrocopter at almost full ammunition, and that's a really bad sign. However, Felix is going down, an Exalted Hero is still alive, and we're seeing the Chaos Army actually disengage from the dwarves now. That is generally a pretty bad sign. They much rather would be overwhelming them. And it does buy the dwarves a little bit of time to reset their formations. Not to mention, the Gyrocopters are able to fire quite a bit too. And this is looking quite bad for Sartorial though. facing up against Grombrindle. How do you think that fight might go? Because he does have a lot of missile resist to ward off the gyrocopters.
Well, I think that Sartorial will get taken out over time by Grombrindle. Grombrindle, definitely a very strong melee combatant. Now, with that being said, Sartorial does have some magic resist, which will be helpful. But I just don't see Sartorial carrying this game. And he doesn't have Final Transmutation or any kind of big damage spell for single entities. All of his damage is kind of devoted to clearing out the Dwarf Infantry, and the Dwarf Infantry is not what you need to worry about in this build.
Yeah, the single entities are quite difficult to take out. Nevertheless, he still has a few rallying troops of infantry, but the bombs are getting dropped, and if they route off the map, then that's basically it for proper Palpatine. If he can get enough cycle charges, that will definitely help. And we are seeing some of the gyrocopters finally coming into melee. Sartorial now charging in onto the Runesmith, knocking him a decent distance away, but Grombrindle is able to get the fight he wants and will begin chopping away at Sartorial. This is pretty rough, although decently close given that he will still be able to cycle charge a tiny bit. It just depends on how well Grombrindle does here. If he does take him out, that will actually be a big comeback for Palpatine.
Yeah, now it looks like Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down onto Sartorial as he tries to cycle charge some more, so he will be taking some big damage here, assuming that he gets hit anyway, which he hasn't yet. Now, the gyrocopters actually have pretty good and allow Grombrindle to wail away at him a bit. And you can see that the balance of power is very heavily in favor of the Dawi at this point. And I wonder, I have to say, I know that Palpatine had a game with this exact build streamed just a day or two ago. I kind of wonder if Felix might have seen that and thought that he could abuse that particular build with a mass gyrocopter style.
Yeah, and regardless, it seems to be going pretty well. Of course, going for mass chariots gives you a solid advantage versus many builds, but their main counter is indeed the dreaded gyrocopter spam. That is one of the main weaknesses for Chaos. They have a hard time dealing in the air battle, and the Exalted Heroes just really weren't able to carry out that victory. At least not this time, just because of the slows from the Runesmith and Grombrindle too, just posing a pretty big threat. But nevertheless, Sartorial is unbreakable. There is always a chance that he could get some extremely lucky RNG and kill out everything here, but very likely that will not be the case. Nevertheless, we'll have to see if that does play out.
I definitely don't see it happening, and it looks like Extraordinary Life of Felix going to be taking a very, very solid tournament win today.
Yeah, he's played in many a tournament, finally getting in that victory. A lot of hard work and some very good games. 2 wins against Papa Palpatine, defeating the Viking, climbing all the way to the finals. And that's gonna be it. A solid win for Felix, closing out the tournament.
Yeah, congratulations
solid
to
build.
him.
And yeah, we can really see the damage values on those gyrocopters and bombers was insane. The idea is you just focus fire the Exalted Heroes, and generally as Chaos, if you want to deal with this build, you want more Marauder Horsemen to ward them off, since they use more ammunition than Exalted Heroes, and they're a lot less prone to getting sniped out. But there we go. That shall be the end of the tournament today. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. And we'll be hosting another tournament in the near future. Thank you very much for Dactor for casting, and all the players that played today. Do you have any final thoughts?
Nope. Just thanks everyone for watching, as always.